is risen. I'm so excited, and welcome to the Kingdom Mindset Show. This is where faith meets neuroscience, and we explore what it really means to renew your mind and lead from a higher perspective. I'm your host, JJ Shaver, and today we are joined by a guy who doesn't just think outside the box, he actually dissolves the box completely. Yeah, Paul Daniels Jr. Yeah, he's here on this show. He's the creator, if you haven't heard of him, of peripheral thinking. That is a concept rooted in the idea that solutions that we're looking for, they're often found in the places that we're not looking. Paul's journey is marked by labels, by setbacks, and really divine redirection. But what it's done is it's led him to become one of the most innovative business minds in the entire world. All right, Paul has advised Fortune 500s. He's grown companies across, listen to this, 27 different countries. Yeah, and he's helped leaders generate over $21 billion in new revenue. But more than that, Paul is a man who sees the world through a different lens. All right, one I believe God placed in him on purpose, for purpose. So in this episode, we talk about the God-given gift of perspective. How the things that once made us feel maybe different might actually be the key to your calling. We dive into what it really means to think peripherally, to lead boldly, and to trust God is often working in the margins, all right? Outside the obvious, beyond the familiar. So if you've ever felt like you just don't fit in, maybe you just don't fit the mold, or like God is calling you in a way of thinking that goes against the grain, this episode right here, this is your confirmation. I'm so excited for this. Let's get into it. Welcome, Paul Daniels Jr. Paul, thank you so much for being on our show. Can you tell the audience just a little bit about who you are and what you've got going on?
Yeah, JJ, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the introduction and for the invitation. Longtime listener, first time guest. The brief story about me, born in Southern California, grew up all over the country. I'm living in the 27th house I've lived in since I was born. So lots of moves in the US and abroad. And I've lived a life of a lot of different experiences. So I've been very fortunate to see the world, not just from the places that I live, but the places that I travel, the clients that I have, to see from so many different perspectives. And as we'll probably find in our conversation, there's a few things that I've tapped into over time that's helped me to help my clients achieve things they really never thought were possible, and do that using access and resources that they already have available to them within arm's reach, but they just can't quite see it. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I'm committed to reaching 100,000 leaders by the end of this year and 1 million by the end of 2030. So I've got some big goals, and I'm excited because I'm going to count each and every one of you toward that 100,000 person goal this year.
Absolutely love that, Paul. That is so impactful. What brought you from where you were to where you are now? What was this journey about?
Thanks for asking about that. It was a journey with a capital J for sure. As a child, I was labeled slow, dumb, stupid, lazy, and those labels actually followed me throughout school, university, graduate, and I started my first company in my mid-20s, grew it, sold it, and then I joined corporate America, and there were the labels again, but they were different, right? They would never call me stupid. You think differently than we do, Paul. Kind of an outsider. Now, we like the results, but you're just not like one of us. Fast forward, at age 39, I generated $1.4 billion in revenue for the companies that I worked for. I'd risen the ranks of 2 Fortune 500 companies and really kind of done quite a bit in corporate America, but I was still sitting in a boardroom hearing people say, "That's strange. I'm not sure I follow you. It's different. You're an outsider. You don't think like us," whatever it was. At age 40, I had a diagnosis, and it changed the way that I think and the way I see sort of the world. So I started to dive into studying the most prolific innovators throughout history. These are people that had raised their skills to new levels, in some cases even created new industries. People like Henry Ford, Da Vinci, Agatha Christie, Richard Branson, Muhammad Ali, President JFK, The list goes on. All really innovative people and all dyslexic, of all things, right? So what I found is about 10 to 15% of the population is dyslexic or have some kind of neurodivergence. 20 to 30% of entrepreneurs and nearly 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. So there's something to this. We're not dumb. We don't have a learning difference. In fact, NASA actively recruits people with dyslexia. NASA, about 50% of NASA is dyslexic. So clearly, we're not at a disadvantage. We have skills that are out there. And that's what I found, that there are a set of skills that are found innately within people with neurodivergence. So wired in our brain, we see, an example, physically, we have a broader peripheral vision. So we see more than most people do. Thus, the name of the company that I've started and founded and I speak on. And these skills are in high demand. In fact, the World Economic Forum did some studies. Every 2 years, they put out a report called the Future of Jobs Report, where they list the skills that are needed for all companies in all industries around the world in order to achieve goals in 2025, 2030, and beyond. Well, the skills that keep coming up again and again are these top skills, cognitive skills. There's 9 or 10 of them. And it has the fewest number of people in the working population with those skills to fill the need. You overlay that with the dyslexic skills, 8 of the 9 are found innately within dyslexics. But we can't birth enough dyslexics. So that was my light bulb moment. As I had been using my dyslexic thinking skills to help other organizations, now 31 industries in 27 countries, I decided, let me translate what's innately within the dyslexic brain so that neurotypical people could learn it and apply it to find what we see all day long: more options than obstacles, more choices than challenges, paths and problems. We have never been without ideas and the ability to take action on those ideas. We just don't have enough that are naturally wired that way. So that's my journey, and that leads to where I am now with the company that I founded in 2007 called Peripheral Thinkers.
I love this idea. Talk to me about and where you're going with this.
Yeah. So peripheral thinking is a skills model that mirrors those skills found innately within dyslexics. And there are anywhere between 5 and 6 categories, 12 to 19 skills, depending on the research studies that you've looked at. So I've looked at and been involved in research at Cambridge, Stanford, and then large organizations have done their own studies, and the World Economic Forum, et cetera. The short part of this is that we all have the ability to see more than what we see already, and thus the peripheral thinking. So if you think of a challenge that you face, you're often facing that challenge using the experiences that you've had in the past, right? What has worked in the past? And then you look at your current surroundings. What are competitors doing? What are my peers doing? And so on. And all of this to reach that goal or overcome the challenge in order to reach the goal. It's terrific, but it's still from your perspective, filtered through your set of experiences. So if we can expand our awareness, even in everyday experiences, we capture new insights that have principles that can be applied with other principles from the periphery and combined uniquely in order to come up with a unique yet proven approach to overcome the challenge and consistently reach the goals, exceed the goals, innovate before and beyond the next obstacle. That's the purpose of peripheral thinking.
I love that.
And when it's my superpower, and I want to give it away. I want more people to have it, so that they have the sense that nothing's impossible. Absolutely, I've proven again and again, nothing's impossible. In fact, everything is possible.
Love that. Yes. When I first started learning about you, Paul, I think of peripheral vision. I'm thinking of something my father had always taught me in athletics, right? You can see more than a typical eye. How much can you see out of that corner of your eye? And how much of that are others missing? This idea does resonate with me. So I love that idea. How are most leaders that you have seen reacting to this?
Well, from the stage, doing keynote speaks from the stage, it's where I get most of my business. The executives will come up after I speak and say, "Okay, I really want you to come and give this speech to my company or to my leadership team or whatever." And then we talk more about that. So it's received well. I think some of that has to do with just being on stage and being able to interact with people, like you and I talked about earlier. The day of waiting to see someone face to face, though we long for it, is not necessary in order to engage people worldwide. So there are still going to be people that are naysayers. Hey, that's too risky. I don't want to try new things. We've been the leader of our industry for 150 years. Terrific. And if you're not willing to change, great. Now, what's your stock symbol? Because I'm going to short sell it, and I'm going to find somebody that can take over all of your clients. I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm just saying there's an opportunity for me. Think of, if you're stuck in that way and you haven't been through COVID and you haven't seen AI, which means you've been under a rock, you don't recognize that everything is changing now. If you're not willing to change for the times, but more importantly, to create the change that other people must adapt to, then you're status quo at best. Peripheral thinkers are the trendsetters. Peripheral thinkers are the disruptors, not the disruptive.
I love that. If you are on a team and you aren't that CEO, you aren't that founder, you aren't the decision maker, how would you get the other people on your team to stop playing it safe?
What do they say? That the best revenge is success, right? Something like that. So, not that you're looking for revenge, but the best way to do it is to adopt a couple of these skills to understand where your gaps are. All, whatever, 15, 19 skills, they're not all required for you to achieve what you want to, but there will be some that are gaps in the way that you think, see, and act. And so by focusing on a few of those and trying a couple of exercises, I've got a 4-minute exercise I can take anybody through, and it teaches one of the most prolific, one of them is the single skill that all dyslexic innovators have in common. And once it's taught, you have it forever, and you can apply it every day, all day. Doing that as a non-leader or non-executive is critical for everyone, whether you're in a team, an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, a solopreneur. It doesn't matter whether you're anythingpreneur. We can all benefit from using a different way of thinking in a time where everything is changing. And that different way of thinking has been around since the first disruption, because it's innately baked in to the wiring of the brain for people throughout time. So it's always been there. Dyslexia has only been a big issue since standardized testing and reading and writing were mainstream. So we're not talking about since the beginning of the earth. We're just talking about this little time. Yeah. And
they were just genius. They were leaders. They were innovators. They didn't have that label put on them by the time that they could start talking.
A friend of mine is a National Geographic explorer, has been for almost 3 decades now, and she studies indigenous cultures that don't have a written language. And her findings, she also is dyslexic, which she also found out very late in life. Her findings are that those people that are the leaders of the wayfinders, the people that live on the ocean and they navigate without maps and charts, they just all the senses, people in the desert and jungles, whatever. She's found that they too have the same brain chemistry, the same brain neural pathways as those of neurodivergent dyslexics. So they've been around forever. I don't know how we got on that, but it was a great conversation briefly.
It is. If no one knows what a wayfinder is, watch Moana. You have a different sense and you utilize those senses in a way that no one else is. That's what made wayfinders so incredibly valuable. What made you start diving into this? What age were you? And a lot of people, if they are being labeled as slow and they are going into self-doubt and misery and start going in a downward spiral, what was it that brought you up instead of taking you down?
This has not been all roses. There were some downs that were down and for a decade or more, very difficult. There was always something in me. I knew that something was different about me. Initially, I thought it was because I was stupid or slow. And yet I still knew that I could come up with ideas and create things that other people never thought about from an early age. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go into that trade and I'll be somebody that works with their hands and builds whatever. It was at age 40 when the light bulb came on, and I was diagnosed with dyslexia when our daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia. Now we knew she was having some challenge. They did the testing and came back and started to read out the results. I said, oh, I get that. I got tested. Ta-da, there it is. I go, okay, now I have a baseline. I have a language that I can use to at least understand what's going on in my brain. And I started to try different ways of explaining my thinking, which is still very difficult to explain because I have all of these 19 skills. And so they're all working at all times. I've also had to learn how to communicate in a way that more people can understand, keeping it simple and peeling the onion back instead of cutting the onion in half and exposing every single layer and explaining that's how I got to the middle. Because it was a tissue box plus a magazine article I read, watching a guy walk his dog around the block, the new Tesla, the fact that I burned myself the last time I was welding, that all of these things played into an idea for fill in the blank.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And it's so cool that you're doing this for others. You are actually taking the things that you are learning with this, the things that have made so much money for other people and done so well for other people. And you are opening the box saying, here you go.
It often starts just with, hey, let's talk a little bit. So speaking with a young executive now in his 20s that is part of a startup, and we meet once a month. We talk through some things, and then I help him see from different perspectives. And those perspectives aren't necessarily my perspectives. They're the culmination, the resource library, my secret database of experiences from everyone I've ever met. That's another thing about dyslexics. What we see and hear always reminds us of something else. Our memories and what's in our brain is always there. And it's always checking to see what other options there are. So when working with folks, my goal really is to help first understand where they are and what they're trying to do, where they're going, and then assess some of the basic skills. And then we'll pick one or two skills and we'll focus on those for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever. And we'll just go through some exercises and reiteration, and then we'll start taking logs of what's happening, what they're seeing, what they're learning. We store these things in what's called a peripheral resource library with some categories so that they can access them later. And so all of this, in essence, is systematizing, if you will, the way a dyslexic brain thinks all day, every day. The normal human sees about 500 images per second. A dyslexic sees about 4,000 and in 3 dimensions. And it can be learned.
That's a big change.
Right. But it's not just me. It can be learned. Now, whether you get to 4,000 and in 3 dimensions is irrelevant. The fact that you get from 500 to 600 and a couple of them are in 3 dimensions, that's enough to grow $1 billion company, that itself.
And it's so interesting. I do a lot of my research on neuroscience and how your brain works. And it's amazing how God made us amazing. Our bodies are amazing. Our brains are so amazing. The way our brains work, knowing that we can literally rewire the way that we do things if we do it right. Humans like you, Paul, that are just like, hey, this is a great skill to learn. And then knowing that we as humans can rewire the way that our neural pathways are firing. This is very powerful stuff.
I love the way you described it, man. You made me excited. Tell me more.
It's so powerful. For so long, people thought that we lost these cells in our brains and we're never going to get these cells back. It's interesting to me that everybody's whole life, this was based off of a study done in 1908 with science mice that were not changing their environment. The study, yes, was relevant if you're going to sit and do nothing for the rest of your life. But
Right.
if you're changing the environments that you're in, these little pathways, these little cells, these neurons in your brain can rewire the way that you've always thought. I love that. I want to know, what is the most important skill that the peripheral mind sees that the average human doesn't?
It is a skill called interpreting. And interpreting takes seemingly unrelated ideas and principles from the periphery and reassembles them in new ways. You were talking about your peripheral vision and sports, right? And so you've heard the phrase, wow, they have the ability to see the whole field, right? That's a common phrase, or the whole court, or whatever that is. Peripheral vision goes outside of the field and sees not just the stands and the stadium, it sees the entire community and its place in an ecosystem. Okay, so if we have 4 minutes, I'm happy to just demonstrate interpreting.
Yes, please do.
If we don't, then
if you would, let's do it, Paul.
Okay, cool. All right, here we go. So if you're listening to this, there's going to be a part that I'm going to tell you not to do because I'm going to ask you to cover your eyes. And if you're driving and listening to this, I don't want to be responsible for that. Okay, so here's the lesson. Imagine that you're standing in a mountain field and it's covered with wildflowers. It's early summer. The air is crisp and cool. The sun's warm on your face. And as you look out on this huge mountain field covered with wildflowers, bam, right in front of you is the biggest challenge you've ever faced, personally, professionally, whatever that you face. It's rising like a monolith out of the flowers. Okay, now take your hand and cover your eyes. Don't cover them completely, just so you can't see what's right in front of you. Great. Now, this is where you follow my lead. Great. Okay, so what you can't see in front of you, that's okay. But what can you see? Well, you can move your eyes up, down, left, right. Now, in fact, find something in your current environment that you haven't noticed before. It could be anything, a dust fleck on your desk, a shadow on the wall, a mark on the ceiling, whatever it is. Can you find something? Okay, I'm assuming you have. You can take your hand down. You can't make out the details, what was right in front of you, but you did find something in your periphery, and though it may not be really crystal clear, it's there. That's peripheral vision. Now, look at that new thing.
I love
For
that.
me,
That is such a great example.
Well, that's just the beginning. So that's peripheral vision. Now look at the object that you found that was different. For me, it's a pinhole in the paint right in front of me. Okay, what was in my periphery is now clearer because I'm looking at it. Just like I'm looking at that monolithic challenge in the field, right? Okay, that's peripheral awareness. Now, let's move, say, 100 yards to the right of your original starting point. Looking at that monolith, what does this new perspective uncover about it? Well, you see more shadows, maybe some depth, and so on. And you can continue looking at that in a journey around that monolith. And if you've got a team, you can take them with you on that journey, right? A 360-degree review, very common. The challenge is that it is still being viewed from your perspective, from your team's set of experiences. So from that starting point, 100 yards to the right of your original starting position, instead of looking at the challenge, this time, look around. Now what can you see? Well, likely there's more objects, maybe different terrain in that mountain field, and there are people there. But these people, they're not part of your team. They're not part of your network. They're not even part of your industry. And they're not looking at your challenge. They have their own. They have their own challenge. They have their own goals. They have their own ways of achieving, exceeding goals, overcoming challenges. They have their own experiences. These people's experiences may be just what you need to see your challenge from a very different perspective using a new and uncommon resource. So when we're in the mountain field, we're doing some peripheral thinking. We're also using the interpreting skill because I'm taking the content that I'm learning from that person, which isn't just lateral thinking. This is beyond that. I'm taking their experiences, I'm learning from them, and I'm breaking down into principles and proven solutions and approaches, and I'm bringing that back with other things from that side of the mountain and from the other side of the mountain, and I'm putting those together and saying which of these principles, when combined, could be a really unique and powerful approach to reach my goal, to overcome my obstacles, and very low risk because it's already being used. And I'll have an example if we've got some time later. I'll give you an example of how this worked for a hospital that literally changed the way healthcare and patients interact today, 15 years since we had this discovery. But that is, in essence, the
I
interpreting
love that.
skill. Being able to
Yeah, no,
see
that
that.
makes, I would love, I think it's important for people to understand how this works in real life. I'm really connecting with this because your perspective is your truth. I want people to understand that. Your perspective is your truth. And my perspective is different than anybody else in the world. There might be a little bit of similarity, but there is nobody else that has my exact same perspective on life. And that perspective is a culmination of the way you were raised, the people you have been around, the people you associate with, the way that you work at your personality, your home life. But your perspective is your truth, and nobody has that same exact perspective. So being able to understand perspective is important for individuals. If you're sitting in a room with 100 different people, every one of those 100 different people has a different perspective.
JJ, so from your research, is perspective static or can it grow?
Every day should grow.
Now, the motto for peripheral thinkers is that right now, I can access everything I need to achieve anything I can imagine when I know where and how to look. The where to look is everywhere, right? Especially the periphery. The how to look is with an open and interpreting mind, the skill set interpreting, an open and interpreting mind. That then changes the next time I walk around that monolithic challenge. I'm taking with me perspectives that have never even faced that specific challenge, aren't in my industry, aren't even in my country or culture. I'm taking their experiences with me as I move around, and I'm seeing it from multiple perspectives that I've adopted or I've at least assimilated to some degree. Some perspectives work, some don't, but at least I know I've got all the resources I need.
Yes. I've never heard a carpenter say, gosh, I have way too many tools. Never can have too many tools in your toolbox. You know what I mean, Paul?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you caught me on one of my addictions. So tools are one of those. So yes, thank you for confirming that. And I'll make sure that my wife is able to watch this video to confirm that, yes, from
Yeah,
a
just
very
have her watch
brilliant
this. She'll
person,
be fine
JJ,
with it,
yeah,
I'm sure.
she'll say, perfect. Now I get it, Paul. Go ahead. Home Depot, carte blanche.
But I'll tell you what, it is very powerful stuff. Would you mind going into that hospital example?
Yeah, so I was working with a small regional hospital in the Midwest in 2010, and they had reached out to me because they were having some challenges on patient satisfaction, patient engagement scores, and the hospital was starting to trend downward. They had been the staple of that community forever. It was the go-to place, but sadly, they were starting to see a dip. So I met with the patient engagement organization, and we went through a couple of days of training and some conversations around peripheral thinking. At the end of that call, or at the end of that 2-day on-site, the director of the department came up and asked me if she could change the next week's phone call that she and I had scheduled to another time because she was taking her family on vacation to Hawaii. Perfect. Yeah, no problem. So we rescheduled, got on a plane back to Texas. And that Sunday night, I got a text from, we'll call her Jennifer Johnson, just for anonymity. And it was from Jennifer, and she said, hey, can we chat? Exclamation point. Jennifer is very buttoned up. Okay, she's the professional's professional. So I replied, sure, let's talk, and hit send. And within seconds, the phone rings, right? And it's her. Okay, so I answer, how's it going, Jennifer? And she is beside herself. Paul, I get it. Oh my gosh, that peripheral thinking, interpreting thingamajig you said, now I finally get it. Okay, calm down. Have you hit the minibar yet? No? Okay, good. So tell me what happened. She got a text from the manager of the resort welcoming her to the Waikoloa Village Resort and Spa. And thank you for being a valued member. And if there's anything I could do, please contact me, and gave her the direct line to the manager. He said, you get it? I go, yeah, that's a great message. I get that. Said, I want to do the same thing for patients in my hospital. I said, okay, now you really do get it. I mean, it was a solution that's already in place, right? 2010, we text with proven success, but never applied in the healthcare industry. And 90 days later, we're implementing texting. Not me, I'm not the technical guy, but we're implementing it to help patients know when their doctor's coming, help their families know where the bathroom is on that floor, or if they're staying longer, what hotels are available, and restaurants, and just all kinds of things, right? It's skyrocketed. Now, you fast forward almost 15 years now, and you see electronic communications between healthcare providers and patients everywhere, not in 2010. And Jennifer is now the chief patient experience officer for a 20 hospital healthcare system. So at one moment,
that's amazing.
She had just expanded, right? We talked about going 100 yards to the right. She went thousands of miles away. And her peripheral thinking mind was just subconsciously processing some stuff. The same thing is true, and you can do it by stepping outside and looking at a flower. You don't have to go to Fiji. You can do it right where you are by looking at that pinhole in the wall or whatever you saw and think, why did that catch my attention? Why is that different? What's the principle behind that being good or bad? And then capturing those and the results of those and using them for future needs.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And honestly, it's the way that people are operating now. In 2010, that was not happening. That is impressive.
Not in healthcare, for sure. In healthcare. Yeah, you're right.
No, not even close. I've got a couple questions that I want to ask you, quick fire questions for the end of this episode. What's one mistake that turned into a win for you?
Having been labeled as I had and having achieved things that I didn't think were possible, the companies that I was working for or with or consulting didn't think were possible, and still doubting the truth of the success. There's just something internally that I've learned that my gut is good. And regardless of what other people say, success or failure is just the next step in this journey. I don't care who puts a label on it. When I was in school, obviously reading and writing was difficult. Learning was a complete challenge. I'll admit, I cheated a lot in classes, not because I didn't know, it's because I didn't know how to do the test. But I was capturing tons of content from those courses. When you're in a situation where you've gone through enough experience, please trust your gut.
Yeah, that's intuition. Your intuition is such a God-given, spirit-given thing that we all possess, and very seldom listen to that gut feeling is a lot of times the right answer. And people aren't trusting themselves. If you don't trust yourself, who are you trusting? That is powerful. And it's so true. That is the best lesson that anybody could ever take away from this. Thank you for sharing that, Paul. I waited 37 years before I really understood that concept. When I was in school and I was playing athletics, people are telling you what to do all the time. But when you get out of school and you're on your own, it's like, okay, you have that free will. You can do as much as you want or as little as you want. And that is what is so interesting about high performers. I see people that have come out of great cultures, great home environments, great families, had money, everything that they needed growing up. But when they get out on their own, they are unable to put the pieces together to perform at a level that's going to make them the person I feel like that they were put on this earth to be. It's so empowering to see people that are really embracing who they are, because we are our own creation. Nobody else is Paul Daniels Jr. Nobody else is JJ Shalver. Nobody else is anybody that's listening or watching this podcast. It's those that step into true authenticity, that are really living the life that they were put on this earth to live, stepping into that authentic self, that are performing at the highest level. And thank you for what you do. Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate your time, your wisdom, your insight. Thanks, Paul.